There is an almost imperceptible moment in the manifestation process, and yet it is at this very point that most people give up without realizing it. Not because they stopped trying, but because they tried too hard. It is when the ego subtly takes control of the journey. It whispers with urgency. If I repeat it more times, if I control every detail, if I push myself to the limit, then maybe the universe will hear me. And in this attempt to force the flow, what vibrates is scarcity. The field does not respond to the desire itself. It responds to the vibrational state behind it. Quantum physics does not bend to effort, but to frequency. It does not recognize insistence as a sign of faith, but as energetic noise. While the mind is stuck in the how, the field remains silent, waiting for coherence, not control. Today, you will understand why the ego complicates what the soul already knows to be simple. Together, we will dissolve this internal noise and remember, reality is not manifested through force, but through attunement. Where there is resonance, there is response. The ego is cunning. It does not shout, it convinces with logic, and one of its most subtle strategies is disguising excessive effort as discipline. It makes it seem that the more you try, the more you repeat, the more you insist, the closer you will be to what you want to manifest. But in the quantum field, that kind of effort does not vibrate creation. It vibrates lack. The field responds to your inner state, not to the number of actions you execute. When action is born from anxiety, it does not communicate clear intention. It communicates mistrust. The ego wants to control time, methods, people involved, every little detail. But the more control you try to impose, the further you drift from the natural flow of reality. Bruce Lipton has shown that the emotional state you are in while repeating a thought is what determines whether it will be integrated biologically as a new belief. In other words, repeating affirmations of abundance while vibrating scarcity only reinforces scarcity within your system. The ego tries to force what can only be absorbed through coherence between emotion and thought. This is the invisible trap. You believe you are doing your part, but in truth, you are fighting against the field with tension, fear, and urgency. And all the field understands is, this is not here yet. Effort, in this case, becomes confirmation of absence, not of presence. True manifestation does not require a strong ego, but an aligned heart. When you stop pushing reality with the mind and begin to sustain it with genuine feeling, the quantum field starts to reorganize circumstances. Not because you demanded it, but because you became compatible with what you wish to live. Imagine a freshly planted seed. It rests beneath the soil, embraced by darkness, silence, and mystery. Those who trust the timing of life water it gently and wait in peace. But those who doubt dig up the soil every day to check if something is growing. And in this anxious gesture, the root is harmed. The sprout never emerges. The ego does exactly this with our desires. It does not tolerate the invisible. It does not trust the invisible. So it tries to accelerate the process, interfering where there should only be surrender. Is it working? It asks. And with each doubt, it drifts away from the vibration of creation, entering the field of mistrust. Joe Dispenza teaches that the future only manifests when you already vibrate the feeling that it is real now. But the ego wants guarantees before it feels. It wants to see the sprout before believing in the seed. This inversion disrupts the natural flow of manifestation. It is not the field that fails, it is the ego that will not allow it to operate. The seed needs time, trust, and space. It needs a vibrational soil that says, I believe, even without seeing. The quantum field behaves the same way. It responds to the frequency of your being, not to the frequency of your doubt. It blooms when you stop digging. You do not accelerate life by pushing it. You accelerate it by attuning to its subtle order. And often the highest act of faith is leaving the soil undisturbed, tending to the present with presence, and trusting that the seed already knows what to do, even if the ego does not know how to wait. In the quantum universe, reality does not respond to effort or isolated desire. It responds to coherence. This means, when thought, emotion, and vibration move in the same direction, the field reacts almost immediately, not because it was forced, but because it was felt in its wholeness. Coherence is not intensity, it is alignment. You can say, I want peace 1,000 times a day, but if your body vibrates urgency and your mind repeats scenarios of fear, the the field registers conflict, not peace. The universe does not hear words. It responds to the vibrational harmony you sustain when you are present. Greg Braden speaks of coherence between the heart and the brain as a state where inner communication becomes ordered, and in that state, miracles become possible. That is because reality is not out there, waiting to change. It is shaped by what you emanate with consistency, not by sporadic effort. The simplicity of coherence is what frightens the ego, because it does not require control nor complex formulas. It only requires presence. It requires truly feeling what you want to manifest, as if you were already living now what your heart desires. And this simplicity is so powerful that the ego, used to noise, tries to ignore it. When you enter coherence, it is no longer you who asks the universe. It is the universe that recognizes without resistance your vibration and reorganizes reality around it. There is no tension. There is surrender. There is no anxious waiting. There is attunement. Manifestation then ceases to be a goal and becomes a natural extension of your state of being. The simple for the soul is natural, but for the ego, it is a threat. It feeds on complexity because it needs to feel indispensable. It needs to solve problems, create obstacles, offer solutions. And when the path presents itself clean, direct, and silent, it begins to doubt. The ego does not trust ease. It associates value with effort. It believes that if something is too simple, then it cannot be true, or it has not been earned. And this is how it turns the manifestation journey into a web of tasks, formulas, excessive rituals, and inner demands, all to keep itself in control. In practice, this reveals itself as self-demand, constant doubts, the need for external validation, and even an addiction to looking for the next step, even when the answer is already clear. The ego refuses to rest, because in silence, it dissolves, and in simplicity, it loses the stage. Bruce Lipton affirms that the subconscious operates 95% of the time, guiding our choices based on old patterns. The ego in this context acts as a guardian of those patterns, even when they no longer serve us. And that is why it resists simplicity so much. It represents the beginning of a new program. Simplicity is the space where the soul breathes, where the field finds clarity to respond. When you choose to trust the simple, a clean thought, a felt intention, a surrender without demand, the ego withdraws. And in that withdrawal, creation flows as it should, light, natural, true. When the ego takes command, it activates an old survival circuit. The body enters a state of alert, known in neuroscience as fight or flight mode. In this state, the nervous system interprets everything as a threat, even if the threat is only the waiting for something that has not yet arrived. This constant activation generates hormones such as cortisol and adrenaline, preparing the body to react, not to create. And here lies the crucial point. In this mode, biology vibrates urgency, scarcity, and defense. The quantum field, in response, reflects these frequencies back in the form of blocks, delays, and pattern repetitions. Joe Dispenza explains that to manifest a new reality, you must leave the known, and the fight or flight state only knows the past. It traps us in what has already been, keeping the mind repeating the same thoughts, generating the same emotions, and collapsing the same type of life over and over again. The hyperactive ego reinforces this cycle. It says it is trying to help, but in truth, it is sending the field a message that nothing is ready, that everything is at risk, that you must fight to conquer. And as long as this vibration predominates, manifestation becomes unreachable, not for lack of desire, but for excess resistance. The release of this block begins in the body, breathing with awareness, slowing down the thoughts, allowing the nervous system to enter a state of safety, because it is only in safety that trust is born, and it is in trust that the field can finally hear what you truly want to live. For the ego, letting go of control is synonymous with weakness. It fears losing command, as if the universe were an unpredictable machine that must be supervised at all times. But in the language of the quantum field, letting go of control is, paradoxically, stepping into the most powerful place of all, vibrational trust. To control is to resist, and all resistance vibrates fear. When you try to push events, manipulate steps, or anticipate answers, you are essentially declaring that you do not believe that the flow of life knows the way, and the field responds to your belief, not to your stated intention. Tom Campbell, physicist and consciousness researcher, affirms that reality organizes itself probabilistically. This means you influence outcomes not through rigid control, but through the gentleness of intention aligned with your state of being. Consciousness directs, and the field organizes. Controlling is like rowing against the tide. You may advance, but with exhaustion, doubts, and stumbles. Aligning with the flow, however, is like surfing the right wave. You use the strength of the ocean itself to go further with less effort. The direction is still yours, but now supported by cooperation, not tension. Letting go of control is not giving up. It is changing your inner position. It is moving from the place of demand to the place of trust. And when that transition happens, the field, which once seemed stuck, begins to move with surprising precision. Not because you did more, but because you allowed. Thinking is natural. The problem begins when thought becomes noise, a repetitive, anxious cycle circling around the same doubts, fears, and assumptions. This is the addiction to overthinking, and it is not only mental, it is energetic, because every thought carries a vibration, and their excess creates a field of confusion around your intention. The ego feeds on constant analysis. It wants to understand, predict, guarantee. But in the field of manifestation, overthinking is like throwing a stone into the water every second. The surface never calms enough to reflect the image of what you want to create. The field responds to clarity, not agitation. Joe Dispenza affirms that the brain, when disconnected from the body and elevated emotions, only reproduces past patterns. It thinks about the new with the frequency of the old. And so even when you want something different, you keep vibrating the same as always. Thought becomes silent sabotage. Beyond that, excessive thinking shuts down feeling, and it is in feeling that manifestation happens. The energy of sincere emotion, united with clear intention, creates the coherence the universe understands. But when everything is stuck in the mental, the soul cannot speak, and the field, which waits for authentic vibration, remains neutral. Slowing thought does not mean stopping thinking, but choosing more consciously what you want to sustain as your dominant frequency. Thinking lightly, feeling deeply, and allowing silence to enter so that the universe can finally respond. There are moments when everything seems in order. You visualize, affirm, repeat, but nothing changes. And this can generate frustration, fatigue, and even the sense that the universe is silent. But in truth, it may be the ego operating in the background, disguised as intention, but vibrating resistance. 3 silent signs reveal this movement. The first is repeating without feeling. Writing affirmations, verbalizing desires, creating vision boards. All of this can be powerful if there is real feeling. When you repeat something automatically, without presence, without emotion, without living vibration, the field perceives only mental noise. And noise does not manifest, it only echoes absence. The second sign is demanding proof before trusting. This is the ego's typical move. It wants guarantees before surrendering to vibration. It is like planting and demanding to see the fruit on the same day. But manifestation only occurs when you already live internally what you want to experience. The field responds to certainty, not to tense waiting for confirmation. The third sign is the obsession with the how. When you cling to how things should unfold, you close invisible doors. The universe has infinite possibilities, but the ego only sees what it can control. This need to control the process blocks the creativity of the field, which works best when it is free to organize. Observing these signs is not a reason for guilt. On the contrary, it is a chance to awaken, to replace automatism with consciousness. Because when you notice the ego trying to dominate the process, you can gently return it to its place and allow the soul's simplicity to take the lead. There comes a point when the tired mind realizes insisting does not generate transformation. What changes reality is not how much you do, but how clearly you vibrate. This is the transition from effort to resonance, a state where you no longer need to prove anything to the universe, only to remember who you are when you are at peace. When you release the complexity created by the ego, the empty repetitions, the excessive rituals, the mental demands, an inner space emerges. And in that space, the field finds clarity to act, because the universe does not respond to quantities. It responds to frequencies. And the most powerful frequency is the one that comes from felt simplicity. Resonance is when your entire being says the same thing, not just your mind, but your body, your heart, your presence. When you desire something with authentic emotion and trust that it is already on its way, your energy aligns with that reality. And then the field reorganizes, not through pressure, but through compatibility. It is like an instrument finally tuned. Everything begins to sound different. Opportunities arise with more lightness, the right encounters present themselves, and even problems take on another dimension. Not because you controlled the process, but because you became a coherent mirror of what you want to live. Resonance is not passivity, it is vibrational presence. It is the silent practice of staying faithful to what you already feel as truth, even before your eyes see it. Because this is how the invisible becomes visible. When the internal becomes so clear that the external has no choice but to reflect it. The conditioned mind associates achievement with effort, accomplishment with sacrifice. But the soul knows that true creation is born from lightness. Living as if it were simple is not ignoring reality. It is remembering the natural wisdom of flow. It is choosing to vibrate trust even when logic demands proof. This simplicity is not naivety. It is inner refinement. It is the decision to trust without drama, to act without anxiety, to desire without attachment. When you choose simplicity, you dissolve the noise the ego creates to feel important. And it is in that silence that manifestation finds room to happen. Greg Braden teaches that the universe does not distinguish between what you live and what you feel intensely. If you feel peace, gratitude, abundance, as if you were already living all of it now, the field responds as if it were already real. Because energetically, it already is. Simplicity teaches that you do not need more information, more practices, more repetitions. You need more listening, more presence, more vibrational truth. And the question that unlocks this awareness is always the same. What if this were simple? Because almost always, it is. Living as if it were simple is living as if it were already happening. Not in the future, not in a distant dream, but now within you. And when this becomes your natural state, the universe no longer needs to be convinced. It simply responds. The ego complicates, the soul simplifies. The ego doubts, the field responds to trust. The ego wants to control. Manifestation happens the moment you allow. You are not here to force life to happen. You are here to vibrate what already exists in potential, and to allow the field to bring it into form with lightness and precision. It is not effort that creates, it is coherence. It is the silent attunement between what you feel, think, and choose to sustain as real. The universe does not reward who tries more. It reflects who vibrates more clearly. And this clear, coherent, tranquil vibration is born the instant you stop fighting against the flow and begin to trust it. If something inside you recognizes this truth, declare with intention, I choose simplicity. Not as a ready-made phrase, but as an energetic command, as if saying to the field, I am ready to live without resistance, to manifest without hurry, to co-create with trust. Because in the end, manifesting is not difficult. Manifesting is simple, and simplicity is the true miracle.